In my last video, I showed you how to build like this. And in that video, I asked you guys if you guys wanted a video on interiors. And it seems a lot of you do, so here's that video. I'm gonna show you how to build interiors just like this in 5 simple steps. And these are tricks I've learned in over 5 years of building in Minecraft, so you can trust me. The first step to building an interior is planning. If you don't plan out your interior beforehand, it'll end up just looking a little messy. And even though you can build your interiors without planning beforehand, I don't recommend it because it makes things a lot more difficult. So here's what I like to do. Before you build your house, think about things like the thickness of your walls. A very popular trick is to have 2 layers of wall, one for the exterior and one for the interior. That way you're not working with the same material for both. This helps a lot because this looks a lot more like the interior of a home, while this here looks a lot more like an exterior. But if you want to build like this, you have to keep that in mind when building the actual house. And that's because it has to be a lot bigger to account for those thicker walls. Another thing is how high you want the roof to be. For example, this is about 5 blocks high, but maybe you prefer having really tall ceilings or low ceilings, and that's all gonna affect how you build the house, whether your roof is very high up or very low. Next, you also have to think about where you want the windows. If you're planning to build a washroom in your house, then maybe don't put a window facing the toilet. Or maybe you really want a window in the kitchen. Well, these are all things you can plan beforehand. If you want a fireplace inside, then maybe make the chimney end up at a similar place outside. That way it's a lot more realistic. Now, there's 2 different ways to build interiors. One is starting from the outside moving inward, and the other is starting inside and moving outward. I personally prefer starting with the outside and then moving on with the interior, but some people prefer building the inside first and then building the house around it. It's all up to personal preference, and you'll probably end up with a similar result, so pick what you prefer and go with that. For this one, I actually decided to challenge myself. I'm gonna try to build this house inside out, so you can see I'm getting the interior walls built out just to give me an idea of the size. And for now, that's it. Now, when you have your general plan, we can move on to finding some inspiration. I use Pinterest and Instagram to do this, but any website like YouTube also works. All you're looking for is for some interior designs that some other people have made. These are some examples from Minecraft, and I try to find things I like about each one. Like, for example, this one uses color really well. For this one, I really like the style of the rug in the middle, and with this one, I really like the little water stream going on at the bottom. So just search up Minecraft interior and you'll find a bunch of inspiration. But of course, interiors exist in real life too, so that's another thing we can look at. You can find inspiration for kitchens, libraries, even just a living room, and these are all great pictures to inspire you for your interior. This step is just to get ideas going, just so you can kind of have an idea of what you want to make. For my build, I found this as inspiration. There's a lot of different aspects I like in each of these, like the green walls, the general vibe of this one, and I also really like this kitchen layout. And once you have that, you can move on to actually building the interior. Now, I break the building process into 3 different parts, starting with the general shapes. So after the house is built, what I like to do is grab some wool and block out where I want things to be. In this case, red wool is barrels or storage, orange wool is countertops or tables, and then purple wool is random stuff like furnaces. And I block them out something like this. This is a kitchen, so I know I want a furnace back there. I want a fridge over here. I want plenty of storage because this is a kitchen, and I want a big table in the middle. Doing this is great because it doesn't get too complicated, it stays very simple, and it's a great way to get your interior started. Because if you go in trying to add all the small details first, you'll get very lost very quick. Trust me, I've been there and it's not fun. So doing this really helps me visualize if it even looks good in the first place. And it's okay if it looks a little empty because we're gonna fix that with a lot of detail later. This is also where you're gonna decide what color you want for the walls, as well as everything else in the kitchen. Now, I talked a lot about block palettes in my last video, so go check that out if you want to learn more. But in general, if you go on Pinterest and Instagram, you can find a ton of block palettes that look really good. And you can use this inspiration to figure out what kind of blocks you want to use for your interior. For example, I really like how they're using soil down there, so I could consider that for my build. And you can do this with the real life inspiration too. If you like the design of this fireplace, then maybe you could use stone bricks. There's a ton of examples out there and a ton of block palettes, so just try a bunch and eventually you'll figure out what you like and what you don't like. That's what I did, and now I can come up with my own block palettes really quickly. I decided to split this house into 3 parts: the main kitchen, a small entrance room, and a loft bedroom. Deciding what a room is can help you figure out what to put there, so that's something I like to do. Next, however, is general detail. For this part, we're gonna start replacing the wool with actual blocks. Like I mentioned earlier, red wool was my storage, so I used barrels and beehives to represent that. Same with the orange, it was gonna be a table or a countertop, and I did exactly that with the scaffolding and the slabs over here. There's a bunch of ways you can use different blocks to represent different things. For example, here this classic fridge with iron doors and trap doors, or this stove using the crafter. Again, it takes some imagination, but just practice a little bit and eventually you'll figure out some things that work for some things, if that makes sense. This is where your interior is going to start to actually look like something, and it just takes a lot of time adding and removing some blocks to figure out what kind of of works. So honestly, there's not much to say. You might have noticed I used a lot of purple wool, and that's because there's too many blocks I wanted to use. So using a different color of wool for each would be way too much. But you can see the kitchen is looking like a kitchen, as well as the bedroom and the entrance. And it's slowly taking shape. But when that's done, we can move on to the fun part, which is the final details. This is my favorite part of any interior because it actually starts to look good, and it's pretty self-explanatory. All you want to do is use flower pots, leaves, paintings, campfires, all of that stuff, and you want to just throw it in the build. Well, it's actually a little more complicated than that, but I try to tell a story. For example, if this is a kitchen, they're gonna need some kind of knife or axe to cut up the food, so that's why this is here. Maybe they just finished baking a cake and they ate a couple slices but were too full for the rest, so this is here. I even added a campfire underneath the crafter, and it looks like it's very hot. These candles here are lit, so it kind of shows that there's people living in this house. Honestly, I could spend days detailing the interior of my builds, but there is also a point where you're kind of overdoing it, so I would recommend try to limit yourself to a certain amount of time, because you don't want your interior to look all messed up because you overdid it. Unless, of course, that's the look you're going for. This is one of those cases where it's easier said than done, because when you're actually trying to figure out what to put where, it can get really complex. So instead of just telling you how to do it, I'm gonna show you how I do it. For the details, I just went crazy putting stuff everywhere. Honestly, I spend a bunch of time in the creative menu, and I just look for things that would look cool in the build. It's very simple, but it can take a lot of time. But as you can see, this is where the interior actually starts to look really good. You'll notice it starts to feel a lot less empty, and it's kind of cozy like a real house. And ladies and gentlemen, this is how I build my interiors in Minecraft. Hopefully this was useful for you guys. I know a lot of you wanted this video, so I hope it helped. Consider subscribing because I'm posting weekly videos just like this. And with that, have a great rest of your day.